Dr. Downs, it's good to see you.
Dr. Rizvi. Oh, that's an old joke. That's an old joke.
I
Back
haven't
from
called you
before
Dr.
my life.
Downs.
I know, right? When I wanted to go to medical school and was going to be a doctor just like
Mhm.
you. And then I saw you just get more and more burnt out and go
Yeah,
through it. Not just you, a lot of doctors I knew go through the amount of burnout that you go through. And then the whole thing about my grades weren't good enough. I mean, that didn't help either.
yeah. I don't think you've missed much. I think the path that you chose is beautiful and perfect,
Thank
and
you.
it's exactly what needed to happen.
Thank you. Well, we're not talking about medicine today. We are talking about a lovely book that you and I both just read or listened to, which is The End of Your World by Adyashanti. And this is, you know, I don't know all the spiritual teachers out there. I certainly don't. I'm not incredibly well read. I suppose I know a lot of them now. But Adyashanti is one that I had never really looked into. And this book was incredible. It was really incredible. I think it was one of the most useful, down to earth guides about the spiritual path that I've ever read.
Yeah, I've heard about Adyashanti for many years. Never really dived into his work. And I think I watched a handful of his YouTube videos in the past, but this was the first deep dive into his material. And I'm glad you recommended it, actually. There's something special about hearing his voice that really did something for me, as opposed to reading it in text. Like his voice sort of, maybe you want to call it transmission. I think his voice
Yeah.
carries something. It carries something that resonated.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so it was essentially, well, how did they describe it? They described it as almost like an audio course. And so it really felt like that. It was broken into distinct sections. I mean, you can call them chapters. I mean, why not in an audiobook? But it felt really distinct and there was some musical transitions. It was really nice, a really nice product. And I agree. Listening to him say it in his own words was really important. But anyway, if you haven't read this book yet, The End of Your World by Adyashanti, definitely read it. It was an exceptional book. We both got a lot out of it, and we've kind of picked out some of the juicier parts that we both really related to. And I know we both loved some of the same parts, so we'll definitely talk about that.
I want to make a point that I find very interesting. Just a synchronistic, maybe fascinating tidbit. The title is The End of Your World. And to me, one of my favorite books is The Disappearance of the Universe.
Hmm.
I just find it interesting that both titles speak to
Hmm.
the dissolution of one's reality. I do think it's interesting. Like it's pointing to something, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We can maybe get into what that something is.
Yeah. 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 Well, I'm
Um,
just curious. How did you find this book, first of all, and what drew you to it?
I wish I knew how I found it. I honestly don't remember. Um, Maybe I was just like talking to, I think it was probably
It's, it's probably an
talking,
algorithm.
yeah, I think I was talking to ChatGPT about um some of the kind of like top books on awakening that were really relatable. Because I'd been listening to a lot of like pure Advaita Vedanta and it was getting very heady and I was kind of like, I need a break. I need a break from that book, so give me another book. And I think this was just on the list, and I just checked it out. And then, honestly, I started reading it on Kindle, and it was fine. But then listening to it, I decided to pick it up on Audible, so I could listen to it like going on walks, and that was really special. So I think I found it through Chat GPT. Thanks, Chat.
That's a that's a good use of ChatGPT. Wow, or any AI really,
Yeah.
as a book recommendation. Cool. Okay. Great. Well, I'm glad you did, and I'm glad Chat recommended it. And I agree. Audible was the ideal way to consume that. Well, I don't know. How do you want to tackle this? What? How did it touch you? What topics uh,
Yeah.
leapt out at
I
you?
think I think just in general, this one of the reasons why this book really touched me is it's really hard to find good information about awakening. Um, it's very easy to find information about getting to the point where you have a big breakthrough. It's you and I, and probably most of the people listening to this could quote it as nauseum. It's all the advice we've always gotten about, you know, a little bit more renunciation, a little bit more focus, a little bit more devotion, a little bit, a little more of all these different like spiritual qualities, and which we'll talk about because he has this whole section on building the momentum that a rocket ship leaving the Earth's gravity needs a certain amount of momentum behind it, and so it's kind of like that phase of life is all this momentum building. I think for a lot of people, we've all had these deeper, realizations about ourselves and about the nature of reality, and I, of different strengths and at different times in our lives. And think once you have that, the path changes a bit, um, because things are stop appearing so clear. Because you thought you reached a point of a breakthrough, but things are still falling apart. And you thought that once you had that breakthrough, that everything was supposed to be great. And the reality is that things only get harder. The difference is
Yeah.
now you have a different set of tools to deal to work through them. And so this was one of those books that really, for me, hit some really good notes, very honestly, about what it's like post, some sort of realization. Which I think everyone, there's probably a reason why it's very popular. It's probably a very common time of an experience of confusion. And I think like most people have had those moments. Certainly, people who've been practicing a while have had those moments where there's a fundamental shift, but then you're left kind of in the lurch because the old advice doesn't really apply to you in the same way anymore. What about you?
Yeah. Yeah, no, those are all really good points. Uh, One thing that struck me about this book is there was a lot of time spent, if not the majority of the book, was spent on the post awakening period,
Mhm.
which is very helpful. It's very, very helpful because it applies to both the people who have moments of realization, but maybe there is lingering karmic residue or their habitual tendencies that haven't really gone away, that keep the sense of identification and the separate self intact. But he also speaks to the process of having a deeper, consistent awakening. And I think the term he used was abiding awareness, where it's not just a momentary glimpse of
Mhm.
realization, but you abide in that. You are in that state, and it hasn't doesn't go away.
Mhm.
And then the whole spectrum in between. I love that so much of the book is spent in that latter phase because it does really the tools used at that point, you can start using it pre-awakening.
Yeah,
It's the same foundational
yeah.
approach to consciousness, to awareness. It's presence. It's um, a non-attachment to what arises. He speaks to the stickiness of thoughts. He speaks to the tendencies of thoughts and belief patterns to form a knot around themselves, giving the impression of a sense of self.
Mhm.
And you actually touched upon this. He talks about this rocket ship analogy, which I really, really like. That
You wanna just go into it? You wanna just
yeah.
just give us an overview of what that analogy is and
Well,
your
the
thoughts on it?
idea is, um, when you want to launch a rocket, the the output of the engines need to overcome gravity. So gravity is this force that's pulling the rocket down, and you can turn on the engines and blast off, but if the strength doesn't actually overcome the force of gravity, it's at a standstill. Um, Similarly, like the rocket can launch, could leave the surface, but it never actually makes it to space because maybe the engines putter out and there's not enough sustained force to actually break the gravity well and go into, you know, low Earth orbit and then into space. And so it's a great analogy because it's sort of this idea of some people have this sort of glimpse of space, but there's not enough momentum that the rocket crashes back to Earth.
Yeah.
Whereas some people, maybe there is a sustained momentum and the rocket actually breaks free of
Yeah.
gravity, and then you abide in that realization. And it doesn't make it wrong or right, because it could be that that initial experience of glimpsing what's past the planet and coming back to surface is what creates the momentum for a future experience of breaking free of gravity altogether.
So
I think,
have there been times in your life when you have like
yeah,
thought you were in space, then all of a sudden we're like, oh no, gravity's still here?
yeah. I recall many many years ago when I was in my 20s, I had this immensely profound falling away of the sense of self. I was in the Le Rablin monastery in southern France. And I was actually at a retreat with Sogyal Rinpoche after having read his book, the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. Uh, and I remember meditating and struggling, like really struggling, because I was trying to focus on my breath. I forget exactly what I was focusing on, but I had this beautiful vista in front of me. There's this huge, vast valley in southern France, absolutely gorgeous. And it was sunset time, roughly. And I just could not do the practice. Uh, And there was so much built up struggle and resistance around what was happening because I just couldn't do it, that I remember telling myself, you know what, you know, forget this meditation. I'm just going to enjoy the weather. And I gave up in that moment. I just gave up. I was halfway through the thought, I'm just going to enjoy the weather, when something happened and it felt like a snap, like something popped open. And the visceral experience was my sense of identity, my sense of self leaked through my eyes and spilled into the valley. And Adam disappeared. Like it is clearly seen that Adam was a construct that made no sense and had no inherent reality. And all that was the valley and the space that the valley held and the mountains and the clouds. And it wasn't even an identification of those objects. It just was the pure presence of nature before me. Uh, And I remember resting in that space for it felt like a long time, but it was probably just a few minutes. And then gradually that sort of in the sense of self sort of coalesced back to the physical body, but didn't completely go back to the way things were. And then I remember in the months after that, there was a rebound, and it sort of I remember I went back to the States, and there was a lot of turmoil and suffering, and a really strong sense of identity reasserted itself after that. And I felt like I had lost something. Uh, And I think it's a very classic experience for a lot of people. You glimpse something profound, and then you rebound back. That to me was a rocket ship that went up and just did not have momentum because nothing had been built up. I was very young and early in the spiritual path, and the rocket ship just crashed right back down. I've since had longer experiences where you could say maybe the rocket entered low Earth orbit and kind of went around a couple times before coming back to Earth. Uh,
Yeah.
I can't say that I'm way out in space yet. I don't know if there's an abiding awareness, but I will say that uh, these days there's not a moment where the the sense of, of a self, uh, Adam, isn't seen through.
Mhm.
It's pretty obvious, pretty clear that it's a construct. But now it's a matter of well, how does that construct relate to the world?
Mhm.
Um, what words come out of its mouth? What actions does it take? Um, Sometimes there seems to be a resistance to what is, and other times there isn't, and there's just action occurring.
Mhm. So what do you think that momentum is that take because you're describing a moment where you were
Good
sitting and
question.
resisting and then releasing, and somehow there's some sort of momentum that in the terms of this analogy that kind of you left the pull of gravity, and is do you think that's something that you can generate, or do you think it's something that just happened? What do you where do you weight those two?
Yeah, it's a great question. At the end of the book, Adyashanti is being interviewed by, I think, Tammy Simon, which sounds true, and there sh don't recall the question, but she's asking about whether the struggles that he had along the journey were worthwhile, and he said, yes, every challenge, every struggle, every book he read, every teacher he was with served its purpose and brought him to where he was. Uh, I do think that the challenges we go through and the steps along the spiritual path, they serve their purpose, and maybe the purpose is to help build the momentum for the rocket ship
Mhm.
to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know for you, honesty was a really big topic.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
could you
Mhm.
maybe tell more about what landed for you there?
Yeah, so pretty early on in the book, there's a chapter about honesty, and I just starts off talking about a story of one of his retreats where he really he starts having this talk about how to be awake means to be completely vulnerable and honest, and to um just be honest, not hide and run from yourself and what's going on and what is for you. And he describes this. He talks about a couple who come back the next day, and they share that they were up until like 3 a.m. or something like that, just talk. They were having trouble in their marriage, and they were considering divorce, and they just sat down and were just both just really honest with each other about what was going on for each one, without trying to protect, without trying to and, get control and position oneself to a place of safety, and how it had been probably the best night of their lives in the middle of this, potentially going through a divorce. And he really shared how, when we're really on, the reason why we don't like being honest, and I don't mean like blatantly lying to people. I mean just like we're not honest with ourselves. We're not honest
Mm.
when we're scared of something, when there's tension. I know for myself, there's been so many times in my life, and everyone will relate to this, where someone asks how you are and you say you're fine and everything's great. And it's not a matter of nicety. It's just like you legitimately could convince yourself that everything's great. And I think, maybe that things aren't as great as they seem. There, you like them to be. And he really talks about how, when you are that honest, you give up control, and that when we deceive ourselves and we deceive others, we are doing it to gain control of other people. Because if we don't tell the whole truth, we shape it in a way that we know won't get us in trouble, or we know doesn't really expose us. We know we're not going to get what we're afraid of. We're not going to get the reaction that we're maybe afraid of, which is why we're not telling the whole truth in the first place. And it's really about controlling and protecting a sense of self that can be hurt if it goes the wrong way. And I really related to this. This is, for a long time in my life, I've kind of seen this edge of honesty, of just self honesty. There was a long time when I really was not honest about where I was. I was, I'd had, just like you, I had a very profound awakening experience when I was younger. And in fact, just like Adya did, like he shared,
Yeah.
I had it about the same age as him as well, and about 24, 25. And for a while, there was like really, there's something. I had left Earth orbit or whatever you want to call it. And then tension started to creep back in, but I completely covered it up. And I tried to keep getting back to that state of awakening. And I spent years and years and years just in denial of that. And to the point where my life completely fell apart. I lost my job. It just, life fell apart for me, because I was just in denial about that. And so I really, really related to this chapter. And, I still, it's an ongoing practice to really be honest. And it's, he makes a distinction, which I think is really important. He being honest isn't like, hey, Adam, I really don't like you, and here's why I don't like you. That's not the kind of honesty. It's not like you just blurt whatever comes out of your mouth because you're no longer censored. That's not what he's talking about. He's really clear. It's about, um, how are you with yourself? Are there places you're still experience tension? Do you still fear the unknown? Do you still fear, um, you don't want certain things to come out about your life, about your past, about who you think you are? Really, what are you hiding? Um, that kind of honesty, not about just like, I'm just free and uncensored and I don't really have to
Yeah.
care what anyone thinks about me because, we're all enlightened or things like that. And so, I really related because it's been a central part of my path. And, um, one of the, in my relationship with my wife, I know for a long time I would, I do a lot of my processing internally. I don't really verbalize what I process. And so oftentimes, like in my relationship with my wife, that I would come to these conclusions about myself or the direction of my life, and I would just like drop them on her. And like she would have she would just be like blindsided by it and really feel that like she wasn't in the relationship. That like, oh, here's Stephen over here just making wild decisions about his life, but we're married, and why are like where am I in the process? And I really, I think just as one example of this honesty, at a certain point, I took a really hard look at her feedback, at her what she was pointing out, and I realized that there was a part of me that wasn't opening up to her because I was afraid that um whatever transformation was going on was going to get stopped somehow by
Oh,
sharing
wow.
it and opening up to her. And that, like, if I opened up to her, then it would stop in its tracks, or it would become ruined or something like that. And all the while missing that, like, the relationship itself is also that trust. And
Yeah.
and in fact, by opening up and being honest about that, that actually provided a huge amount of integration, not just in my own life, but in a relationship. And it was like, you know, I know we've talked a lot about on our podcast about how we can use what the ego is pointing out as kind of where you go. And
Yeah.
this is more of this, it's very uncomfortable to have that conversation, to like admit that, like, I'm not sharing with you because I don't want it to get ruined. As if like me, like sharing it is going to like expose it, and then she's going to like hack it to bits,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is all made up in my mind. And it just prevented me from really being in a partnership for a long time. So that's kind of an example where it's really touched my life. And I found his chapter really illuminating. And he even has this one line in it, being awake means being willing to be crucified, you know? Like, it has
Wow.
nothing to do with the outcome.
Yeah.
It's not because if you're honest, you'll get good things.
Yeah.
It's because honesty is the highest order, is always in the highest good.
Yeah. I do appreciate this a lot that you shared there. Thank you. The comment that you made about honesty isn't just the verbal garbage, where you just tell someone what you feel because you're not holding back and you're not being politically correct. He does actually explicitly make a point that doing that is projection. You're
Yeah.
projecting your own insecurities, your own beliefs about yourself onto someone else. So for me, it's
Mm-hmm.
honesty with discernment.
That's a great way to put it.
It's honesty with discernment because then you have to realize, okay, if that's what you want to be honest about, ask yourself, is that really just projection? And then underneath the projection, that's where the honesty then lies. What's the projection? The projection is always another side of a coin, and that other side is repression. And this is every
Mm-hmm.
psychological textbook will tell you this. Right before projection, there's repression. You first repress and then you project. That's just the
Mm-hmm.
dynamic. So then the
Yeah.
question is,
Yeah.
okay, well, what did you repress? What belief about yourself are you unwilling to see that you've had to defend yourself in the form of a projection?
Yeah.
And that's what I think he's talking about. Can you go deep enough? Can you discern deep enough and be honest with yourself? I, I,
Yeah.
I the honesty with self is really profound. One of the biggest aspects of the
Thanks.
honesty chapter for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I be
Thank you.
honest with
That's great.
myself?
One of the next parts that really stuck out for me was his section on traps and pitfalls.
Mm.
And do you mind if we go into that?
Yeah, yeah. I think he also used the term cul-de-sacs. Is that
Yeah, I think he used the word yeah, exactly. And
cul-de-sac? Like
it's this
you want to go
idea,
further, but you can't.
yeah, it's this idea you get a little detour for a while.
Yeah,
And I love the way that he framed them. So a lot of times people will use the word spiritual bypassing here. I think this is a great synonym for what he's talking about. Where a lot of people say, like, oh, spiritual bypassing is like this negative thing that like you want to avoid and like you always have to be on guard for. Adya is really honest. He says that most people who go through awakening processes go through these stages. You know, the people who have these unbelievably profound, instantaneous, full awakenings are extraordinarily rare.
yeah,
Those are the by far the rarity, the rare occurrence. The most part, in his experience as a teacher, is people who wake up in stages. And he kind of listed these different types of pitfalls, of thinking that the experience you had was the truth and then trying to hold on to that experience. Like I had described earlier, I did that for what, like 15 years of my life. I mean, like,
yeah,
I was in that cul-de-sac for a long time. But his notion is, his idea is basically that these are normal stages of the awakening process that don't mean
yeah.
you did something wrong. They don't mean that you're stuck. And they're places that people tend to end up for various amounts of time.
There's something I don't want to interrupt you. There's just something that he said about that I remembered, which is that when you have an awakening, he's like, I don't care what experience you had in the past. I love when he described um, a student or two that came to him to share with him about something that they experienced in the past. Like, oh, I had this realization
Yeah.
2 weeks ago or a year ago, and he says, well, I don't care. How about now? What's your experience now? Because
Yeah.
that's all there is. It's now. If you're thinking about something in the past, then that's just a concept. It's just a memory.
Yeah.
What is it right now? What's your experience now? And I loved it because there really is this. There's only ever this. And it's this amazing ingenuity of the ego to co-opt an experience and to make it about itself.
Mhm.
Then the experience of realization becomes more armor
Mhm.
around the identity.
Yeah, and it's so I mean, this ties back to honesty, you know? Like the way you get out of the cul-de-sac is by being really honest with yourself. Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah, you're right. Since I did have this experience, this hugely profound experience, it does mean I'm awakened. That's a total total cul-de-sac, or, you know, I'm so good. I've done this practice for so long, and I've done so many repetitions of this practice. So that means that I'm a very serious practitioner who's gone a long way. Um, you know, thinking that the past has any bearing on the present, and what's, like you said, what is alive for you right now. What's alive for me right now is I'm exhausted. My neck hurts. Um, I feel kind of, blah in some ways, just kind of neutral. Like, there's a part of me that would also, or the past would have, if you asked me how I was, would have said like, I'm doing great, and like awakening is progressing smoothly. Like kind of couching it in these spiritual ideas,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
in these spiritual frames of reference, instead of just being like, actually today's just shitty.
Yeah. 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 Just being real, being honest with yourself mostly. You don't need to,
Yeah.
there's no need to like say all this to other people,
Yeah.
because then that
I'm
becomes a
telling you,
trap,
Adam. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
right? Like,
Absolutely.
look how authentic I am.
Yeah. I'm being so
Look how
honest with
freaking
you. Wow. Incredible. Yeah. It always, like, this isn't Adya's language, but this is the way I frame it is, you're always trying to get somewhere else. Like, you're reframing it in a spiritual context so that whatever is now can be different in the future. You
Yeah.
know, that's one of the ways that I tend to relate to it, is like, am I trying to change what is?
So good. Yeah, it's so good. I I I was talking to my mom actually earlier this morning, and uh, just sharing with her that fundamentally the ego is a voice that will convince you in many, many different ways that now is not okay.
Yeah, I
That
feel like
that
you could really break down every problem in life to now it's not okay.
Yeah, yeah, and you need to do something about it,
You
because
must do
now is
something
not
about it.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ajahn Shanti also says something fairly profound. He says, "The only thing I know is that I am." I really appreciated that. The only thing I know is that I am. There's a sort of simplicity to that. And aside from that, I don't know anything. And I forget, he was maybe a little self-deprecating. He was probably saying like, I guess I'm the stupidest spiritual teacher out there. He says something like that, as a joke. But I get what he's saying. Like,
Yeah.
that's really the only thing that you know. And so rest in that. Rest in the don't know mind, as Zen teachers would say.
Yeah. There was a moment a couple weeks ago where someone asked me, kind of out of the blue, like I wasn't expecting the question, like, do you believe in reincarnation? And I'm not, honestly, not in, I don't have a lot of those conversations these days. But someone asked me that, and I legitimately didn't know. I was actually shocked, because in the past I would have totally had an answer for you. I would have had this answer about how, reincarnation is real, or, oh, reincarnation is relative, but really no one ever reincarnates, unless kind of like into, this like intellectual understanding of how non-dualism or Advaita Vedanta work. And I honestly was like, I honestly don't know. I have no idea right now. I have no idea. I feel like, I feel that was it was I wouldn't say that I was scared by that answer coming out of my mouth, but I was definitely shocked that I just legitimately don't know. Like, I have no idea. And I
Yeah,
think it's, things just, I could see things dropping away. Like not having
right.
to, I would, for so long, for so long in my life, I really relied on having the answer.
Wow.
Really relied on having the right. That's why, I would listen to hours and hours and hours of talks and lectures about like Advaita Vedanta to like understand the right answer, to like get like, what is it really saying? And
Yeah.
um, always just led to more questions. Having the best answer.
Yeah. You probably still could offer that person a very detailed intellectual conceptual answer. And you probably would do a good job of it too. But I think if our theme thus far has been self-honesty. The truth is, if you, without relying on concepts, you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it seems like that's a really good point, relying on concepts. I mean, how much of our lives rely on concepts? How much of what we do day to day relies on concepts? We rely on concepts for how to be a good person, how to make money, how to, raise a family, how to have a community, how to, all these how to's, like how to do anything is all like all concepts. It's so
Yeah.
you just get bogged down in concepts. And which one's the right concept? And oh, this concept clashes with this concept. How do I hold both concepts at once? And it's um, I think what Adya's pointing to is you don't need to have the concepts at all to tell to like really that's not what it's about. It's not about having the
Yeah.
right answer.
One thing I realized I didn't share, and I generally like to do this at the beginning, is just
Oh.
a little bit of a background on Adyashanti.
Oh yeah, you didn't.
Um,
What are you doing?
yeah,
People are
yeah,
they're listening.
I'm
They're like, "Who's
slacking,
this
man.
Adyashanti you keep
Who is
mentioning?
this guy? Yeah,
Is it a dog? Is it someone's dog named Adyashanti? Sounds really
Adya,
enlightened."
enlightened dog. Okay, so Adyashanti, his name is Stephen Gray. Stephen Gray, and he's 60 something. I think he's 61, 62 at the time of this recording. Um, he basically studied Zen. And so for those of you curious, although his name is Sanskrit, and I think Adya means primordial, Shanti means peace, primordial peace. Um, although his name is Sanskrit, basically his background is Zen. I will say though that oh, and one other thing, LA, the LA Zen Center, I think is where he did most of his training and where his teacher was. I will say that um, even though he comes from a Zen tradition, he does a very good job at not speaking with jargon. And he even uses some Christian terms sprinkled throughout so that he doesn't, turn off people who come from different traditions. I think traditionally with Zen, for example, you might speak of pure awareness or pure presence or uh, stillness to describe this state. But he uses God and the word spirit quite often
Mhm.
interchangeably with that. And I appreciate that because there are people who relate to that level of awareness in those terms.
Do you, or I honestly I kept wondering because I didn't know a lot about him before listening to this. I thought he was from a Zen background, but
Yeah.
I really didn't get it from his. He did use a couple of things. I think he talked about
You
his own
wouldn't
training. He
yeah.
talked about I believe this was in the book. He talked about the concept of like drunk on emptiness.
Yeah.
This kind of like soulless, just nihilistic obsession with emptiness.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
these things are very clear. Like you got to be in Zen to really get that. Like the stinks of Zen kind of sayings like this, but are really Zen focused. But I would never really get that he was a Zen practitioner because he doesn't use that jargon at all. It's props to him.
Yeah, props to him. He's really good. And one of the things I really like is he does offer stories of how students show up to him and the ways that they hold on to their sense of self and their identity. And you can hear on his voice, he's very gentle. He's very, very gentle. He's not aggressive. Um, I think a lot of Zen has a rap of like the wild and crazy teacher.
Yeah.
He does not seem like that at all. Although he will point out where you're still holding on to an identity as an ego, but not realizing it. I
Mhm.
think he's a good teacher. I've never met him in person, but just listening to this book seems like he has a genuine sense of what he's talking about.
Absolutely. And the real mark of a good teacher is that they speak
What?
in complete sentences. And Like it sounded like he was reading almost at times, like because every thought was so formed.
Oh, is that the mark of a good teacher?
No, it's not. It's not. I appreciated it though. What else you
Yeah.
got? What else stuck out? What stuck out for you about this book, Adam?
Honesty, the rocket ship, what else was there? Um, Gosh, we talked about the cul-de-sacs. What else? What else?
I mean, I want to. If you don't got something,
Yeah.
it'd be great to talk about. You know,
What do you got?
awakening is, and we've already mentioned it during this episode, but maybe we'll dive a bit more into it. Awakening is alive in this moment. It's not. It's right now. It's not the past awakening. It's not the future awakening you'll have at some time in the future. It's right now.
Yeah.
And the freedom that comes from, when you just let everything be exactly as it is. The people that agree with you, they agree with you. And the people that don't agree with you, they don't agree with you. And just how there's such a freedom in that.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. He does bring that point up several times. It's always about your lived experience right now.
Yeah.
Right now. And it's very true. There's the awakened mind, if you will, is timeless. Or another way to put it is it's outside of time. And some people talk about it by describing the now. I know Eckhart Tolle is well known for talking about the now. But really, even the idea of a now is defined in relation to a future and a past when neither really exists. So that's why I personally like in a lot of non-dual circles, there's just the word this.
Mm.
And I like that because there's just this. This to me speaks to the intimacy of what is when there's no more barrier. And when you really live with just the presence of what is, then the idea of a past and a future is ridiculous because there's only this.
How have you seen? No. I don't want to leave this point yet. How have you seen that? In those moments in your life when you've really just rested in that, how have you seen like the world around you change or not change? Like, has that actually had an effect on the way things show up for you, or do you not really not think so?
No, well, for me, I say one of the biggest things that changed for me with the experience of awakening that has so far thus lingered is time doesn't exist the way it did before. And what happens is what is very rich. And it's also quite intimate. What I notice is that when I think of the future, it's almost like a layer comes between me and what is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a layer of thoughts. It's a layer of imaginations and fantasies, hopes, fears that this might happen or that might happen. In many ways, I notice the ego when it arises in relationship to an imagined future. Either a future that I'm afraid will happen or a future that I hope will happen. But even in the hoping, there's a grasping for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what happens is everything that occurs in the present moment occurs through a filter of the future. There's like an obsession over will what I'm doing now be in service to getting to where I want to go, right?
Or how is what's happening going to affect my future?
Exactly. It's all in relation to the future. Now that just happens to be where my ego mind tendencies that's what it does. I know there are people and there are friends that I know where they relate to everything that they do is in relation to the past, you know, bemoaning a lost past, past memories. There's a past good time that now will never be again, right? Like we relate to the past. And
Yeah.
what I've noticed is um, prior to a deeper awakening, there was always that filter there. I was never intimately relating with what is directly. It was always through a barrier. I just didn't know that that barrier was there until,
Yeah.
then I realized, oh my gosh, it's possible to be very intimate with the present moment and not have anything in between.
So how would you, I mean, what advice would you give to people? What would you, if someone said, I also just totally obsess about the future, what can I do? I mean, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I can't say I'm coming from a place of fully abiding in it.
Adam, please help me. Please, I'm worrying about the future all the time. I'm obsessed about my 401k. I'm obsessed about whether I will truly be an executive vice president by the time I will retire. Please, for the love of God, help me.
First of all, if you're just shooting for executive vice president, you got to go higher, buddy. Go president, go CEO. If you're gonna go home, you go big or go home. Uh, that said, that said, what I'll share what I do because of I noticed this tendency in me. Um, the first comes a noticing and awareness. Oh, I'm doing it again. I'm grasping for a future. I'm planning out the next 5 years of my life. Um, where is this coming from? Oh, I'm unhappy with what is. I want something other than what is. Okay. Oh, gotcha. That's what my ego's doing. All right. Cool. And so it's sort of a matter of fact noticing that that's what's happening. And I notice when I notice that the air gets sucked out from the ego. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you, the air under the wings of the ego just gets completely removed and everything falls flat. And just in the noticing, the totally matter of fact, just like I said, oh, interesting. That's my ego's doing its thing again. You know, um, the the momentum drops. It just falls flat, and it's so funny. I was, I'll share with you. I was watering the every evening when the sun sets. We have a little succulent garden in the back of our house. My wife and I, we just have this little ritual where we go and water our little succulents, our little desert plants here. And she was telling me about her day, and I was standing with her while she was watering, and I noticed I wasn't fully present because I was planning how to make the succulent garden prettier and bigger with with white rocks and more succulents and then the thought of, well, really this garden's too small, our backyard's too small, we need a bigger house. But we need to save up more because we don't have enough for a down payment. And I was like off to the races. And I realized I totally missed the last 30 seconds of what she just told me. And and I was like, "Oh my gosh, there I go again. There I go again." And I just dropped it. I just noticed it, dropped it, and I looked right at her. I looked at her face, and then I noticed the quality of experience dramatically changed. I could see every pore on her face. I saw her curly hair framing her face. I saw the water. I felt the cool air on me. I could see the color of the plants. Just the richness of the moment suddenly became clear. And I realized how much of my life was basically filtered through layers of thoughts about a future that may or may never come. This is crazy. And also it impacts my relationship with my wife, my ability to be present with her when she's talking to me. Um, and I'm sure she notices it, when I'm present versus when I'm not. What about you? Have you noticed?
Mm,
Does any of this ring true for you? Do you have something similar
oh
happen
yeah.
to you?
Oh yeah. You and I have talked about this quite a bit. But my tendency is not to go to the future. My tendency is to go just towards feeling good, pure, feeling good. Like I will run from something that doesn't feel bad. So everything I experience is always contextualized in how can I feel better. It's not even
Yeah.
about like I don't care about past, future. I don't care about money. I don't care about any of that. I just care about can I feel better than right now. And what was the original question though? I don't even remember
I
the original question. I just
we were talking
there's a
about
book where like there's
we're
a
talking
book
about a book.
related on the deep background. No, but I asked you a question. I started off with a question. You kind
Yeah,
of flipped me
it's
back.
related to the present moment.
I think I
Uh,
was asking you about what happens, or I asked you about advice, which is good. Your
oh
answer was
yeah.
lovely. But I started out asking about what you notice changes when you are in the present moment.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, I think what changes for me is that space is created spontaneously for myself and others. So if I'm talking with someone and there's no sort of escaping into a, for me, not a future or past, but a like, how could I feel better than I do right now? A space opens up, and I find that I'm just able to be with them exactly as they are and aren't. And I oftentimes find that there's so much more connection. I really feel like I'm connecting with this person, and what they're sharing and what they're going through. I feel like um for the longest time I had the experience of talking to somebody and then not really knowing what was said during the conversation almost. Like, you meet
Yeah,
someone,
because
you
you're
talk
somewhere
to
else.
them. Yeah, you're just somewhere else. You're like, oh, who that I know their name, but like I kind of forget everything else with the conversation we had. I'd say that I really get absorbed in, and I really get absorbed in them, um, and them and what's important to them and what they're going through, and that definitely shifts for me. And I think to me, the question about how would if I was to give somebody advice that said, all I want to do is feel better. I'm tired of feeling so awful. Is to really come back to what I started this whole talk with, which is honesty. Really being honest with yourself about what you're running from, what you think is so wrong with this moment. There's people like me who are, more focused on feeling good. Like there's a huge amount of energy invested in avoiding pain and discomfort. I think we all do that, but like that's the
Yeah.
way. I mean, you do that through the future. I do that through
Yeah.
just like get me out of this
Yeah.
situation. Like it's and but really being honest with what I'm running from, and so I don't find like honestly don't find there's a lot of like peacefulness. I used to think that it was that being that honest and open would result in some sort of peacefulness. But I've even had to give that up because honestly, a lot of times there's a lot of discomfort and a lot of even like pain and tension, and that's what is.
Yeah.
And this yeah, there's something in that doesn't I don't run, and so I'm just okay with discomfort,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
which is the whole point.
There's a lot to be said about getting to know yourself, getting to
It's
know.
almost like that's the entire path, getting to know
Yeah.
yourself.
Getting to know yourself. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me qualify that. There's a lot to be said about getting to know your ego tendencies,
Mhm.
the ways that you avoid
Mhm.
presence.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, when you see that and that stops, then you know your real self. You know that which has always been and never wasn't.
Yeah.
For a double negative there.
Love them
Um,
double negatives.
I love him to. Yep, Adyashanti, an amazing teacher. I think I heard he doesn't teach as much anymore. I honestly wish I had stumbled upon him earlier, but like we said, everything happens at the right time and everything's meant to be when it happens. I highly recommend it. The End of Your World. Actually, I'm probably going to listen to more of his audiobooks.
Yeah, no, I want to too.
Oh. Any closing words of wisdom or non-wisdom?
I'd say exactly where you are is exactly where you're supposed to be.
Yep. And I would add,
For
unless
no
the future
reason.
is better.
You ask the future is better?
Unless the future is better.
Unless the future is better.
Then,
Yeah, unless the
then you
future is better.
shouldn't.
Yeah.
Then you shouldn't be where you are. You should
You should
really
try to
try to
get
change
there
it
at all costs.
as quickly as possible. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Okay, say
Thanks.
it again. I ruined it. Say it again.
I totally forgot it. The end of this episode is ruined.
Wherever you are.
Wherever you find yourself is exactly where you're meant to be.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Steve.
That's all I got. You're welcome, madam. It was wonderful to talk to you.
Likewise, sir. Until we meet again.
Till we meet again.